All right, so you've learned to do this. You've learned now to put things in. You've learned to quote and to identify quotes, where they come from. You've learned how to put the quote in your own words, and you know you need to have examples after that to explain the quote. So far, all of this has been telling me about what you read, what other people said, what other people wrote, what other people thought. Now, the second thing you got to do, now we move on to your part, which is your opinion. So this is the next thing. Now, so step one is, what did you read? Step two is your opinion. Students often think it ought to be the other way around. They think they ought to put their opinion first, and then maybe they'll quote people in paper somewhere. But the idea, one of the ideas behind college life, imagine, this is a stupid thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Imagine you ever go to a party and you don't know anybody at the party, or maybe somebody brought you and they leave you alone for a second and you're just standing there in a party and you don't know any of these people? What you'll often do is you will sort of walk around the party, get a drink, and hang out, listen to music, kind of look around. And then people all around you are having conversations. So you might kind of wander over to some people and listen to what they're saying. Now, think about how rude it would be to just walk up to total strangers and start telling them what you think. Right? That's not going to go well at that party. You can't just walk up to a group of strangers and be like, I hated that new movie that came out. You can't do that. Right? They're going to think you're crazy. So what do? You go over to them and you hear what they're talking. You kind of stand near the circle, or you head over. Maybe even you walk up into the group, or you sit down in their little group on a couch, and you listen to what they're saying for a little bit. And this person says this, and this person says that, and maybe they're talking about sports. And you're like, I don't know anything about sports. So you listen to this conversation. This guy says something about sports. Some basketball player did this, and some basketball player did that, and you're like, okay. And then you go, this is not a conversation you can get into because you don't know this subject. So you get up and you go to a different conversation, and you go wander in this other group. Now, this other group, they talk about movies. Okay, cool. Well, you've seen some movies, and they're talking about movies. Maybe you don't know these movies, so you listen for a little while. Maybe you could even ask a question. Was that movie any good? Maybe like, oh yeah, it was really good. Let me tell you why. And you're listening. Your step one is listening. Step two. Eventually, if you hang out in that group and they're on a subject that you actually care about, like, say, superhero movies and not sports, or sports and not superhero movies, whatever you're into, but you listen for them to be saying something, and if they're talking about something you care about, after a while, you're gonna have an opinion on what they're saying, and you can say, "Holy shit, dude, you are right about that. That movie fucking sucked," right? So you can jump in. At that point, first you listen, then you add your opinion in. It's the same thing here. It's just that what's happening is that the party you've come to is filled with philosophers who are going back 2,000 years. And these philosophers have been talking, because remember, you came to this party a little bit late. You didn't get to the party, like, you weren't the first person at the party, right? You came to the party a little bit late. So, hey, how are you? I believe you're about to meet my wife. So welcome, everybody. Hey, this is my 101 class, and they are, well, I don't know what they're like yet. No. But I'm hoping to find out in the comments to the thing. Totally. How are you?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Maureen is also a professor at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, and you can take classes with her.
You could.
Maureen Matteries, she is in the Academic Literacy and Linguistics Department.
Yeah.
And you can take classes with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to let you rock on.
Okay.
All right,
cool.
Do you want coffee?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Okay. Okay, so this is exciting, guys. It's a guest spot. That's very exciting. So it's like a party. Philosophy is like a party. It's been going on for a long time, and people have been talking to each other for thousands of years, and now you come to a college classroom, and suddenly you show up. And Plato has been talking so much, he's got a whole fucking book. So you see, you have to read Plato first, and then you got to make sure you understand what he's saying, right? If somebody at the party said something you didn't understand, you might ask them to explain a little more. Then you can say, you know what I think about this, and then you can put your own ideas in there. So you're trying to, first of all, you're trying to find a subject you care about, and this is one of the problems with college, is you may be taking classes and you're taking a history class, you hate history. That happens sometimes. I've taken classes that I absolutely hated, and it was a mistake for me to take that class. A class like this you have to take, so just like, good luck. I hope you can learn to like it on some level, and if you can't, I don't know what to tell you. So you enter into the conversation, you listen first, and in a paper, listen means tell me what the other person said, and explain it in your own words and give examples. That's listening in a paper because you're saying what someone else said. Next up, it's your turn. So one of the first things you're going to want to do, one of the places you're going to want to start is tell me how much you agree or disagree with the quote. Now, this is a big one. Notice that I said, tell me how much you agree or disagree. That's important. Students often think about this. They say, well, teachers often say this wrong. Actually, I said this wrong for years. I said to students, do you agree or disagree with that quote? But life's more complicated than that. It's not about do you agree or do you disagree. It's how much do you agree? How much do you disagree? So you could say, Plato says blah, 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 blah. I agree 100%. Or you could say, Plato says blah, 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 blah. I disagree completely. He's so wrong about this. And let me tell you why. But there's other things you can do too. You can say, well, I can see both sides of this problem. On the one hand, Plato's right about blah, 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 blah. On the other hand, he's wrong about blah, 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 blah. You can also say, I mostly agree with Plato. You can say, I mostly disagree. I agree with just a little bit of Plato, but I mostly disagree. So think about it like a scale that moves like this. Do you totally agree? Do you mostly agree? Do you feel like, you can't quite decide because there are good things and bad things to what he's saying? Do you mostly disagree? Do you completely disagree? So you got to talk about, so one of the first questions to ask yourself in your reading is how much do you agree or disagree with what is being said? It can be tough sometimes. A lot of students, they don't know how they feel. They read something, and then I ask them how much they agree or disagree, and they don't know. Part of that usually means you have to go back to the listening phase. You have to return to listening to the philosopher. It means you just need to read more and think more. And sort of study more. And after a while, when you understand what the person's saying, probably you can start to think about how much do you agree or disagree with them. It's a complicated question, but that's and you're going to need to do that for like every quote. Let me say this also: a lot of your teachers in your life have probably told you not to use the word "I" in your papers. They don't like it when you say "I believe this" or "I think this" or "in my opinion," blah blah blah. They get mad at you. The reason they do that is because in high school, what students will do is, let's say you've been given a book to read, but you didn't read it, and you have to write an essay. So what students will do is they'll talk about themselves instead. Or they'll talk about, because it's easier to talk about yourself, because you know yourself really well, than it is to talk about a book, because maybe you didn't read that book, or if you read it, maybe you didn't understand that book. So students love to talk about themselves because it's easier. People, not students, people love to talk about themselves because it's easier. So some of your teachers said you're not allowed to say I this or I that in your papers because they're trying to stop students from talking about themselves and force them to talk about the book. I get why they did that, but it's a mistake. And it's a mistake because you need to talk about yourself a little bit, not all the time. There's a balance to it. You don't want to just, if the whole paper is about yourself, you're not passing. But I'm interested in your opinions, and it is perfectly okay to say Plato says this, ancient Greek philosopher Plato says blah, 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 blah. In other words, blah, 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 blah. For example, blah, 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 blah. I mostly agree with him. You can say that in your papers for me. Now, some of your professors, even your college professors, are going to be kind of assholes about this. You're going to have to find out whether you're allowed to talk about yourself and your opinions in the papers. But I'll tell you right now, I am perfectly happy with you saying Plato says this, and I disagree with him. Completely fine with me. It kind of depends on the class you're taking. And this is another tricky part of college life. Students want easy answers. Well, we'll work in all my classes. But in college, each professor is like his own country, or her own country, or their own country. Each professor is like their own country. And each country has slightly different laws. Similar laws. There are no countries where you are encouraged to commit murder when you go there. So that's going to be true across all of your college courses and all of the countries you visit, but different countries have different laws and different professors have different laws for their classrooms, and you're going to have to learn the professors a little bit. But still, your paper should be about your opinion all the time, every paragraph really. And the main point of the paper and the small points of each paragraph should be your opinion. To get to your opinion, you got to say what other people said. You got to listen first and then speak. Pick it up in the next video. Yeah.